Houston, we've had a problem. Main B bus undervolt. Roger, main B undervolt.
The year was 1970. The Rolling Stones were on top of the charts. The Beatles had just broken up. The Baltimore Orioles won the World Series, and the music world was mourning the loss of both Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin. All of these events were put on hold on April 11, 1970, when the Apollo 13 space mission launched.
The mission was manned by 3 crew members: Jim Lovell, the commander who was also on Apollo 8, and 2 first-time astronauts, Jack Swigert, command module pilot, and Fred Haise, the lunar module pilot. The astronauts went through years of intense physical and mental training to prepare themselves for the mission. NASA invented numerous ways to test their bodies to their limits.
The design of the ship was broken into 3 parts: the lunar module, the service module, and the command module. The command module was where the astronauts would spend their time and control the spacecraft. The lunar module, nicknamed Aquarius, was a rover that was designed to be driven by 2 people on the moon. It only had an oxygen supply for 2 people for 2 days. The service module was where the engine and all equipment vital to life was stored, such as oxygen tanks and power. During the mission, the ship had 2 tanks full of liquid oxygen, a substance that is less than negative 320 degrees Fahrenheit. This substance was essential for both breathing and powering the rocket. Over time, the oxygen would coagulate at the bottom of the tank, and the crew would need to hit a switch that would activate a fan in the bottom of the tank, essentially to stir up the oxygen. 56 hours into the mission, Haise was told by Mission Control to hit the switch. Faulty wiring caused a spark, and the oxygen, an extremely flammable substance, exploded. The explosion took out 1 full tank and made a small puncture in the other. Commander Jim Lovell looked at the gauge for oxygen as one was empty, the other was visually going down at a gradual pace. This is when Lovell muttered his infamous phrase to Mission Control.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Mission Control decided that there were 2 possible routes home. One would take 1 day with a low chance of survival. The other would require going around the moon and using the moon's gravity as a propelling force. This would require the use of the lunar capsule and would take around 4 days. Remember that the lunar capsule was designed for 2 people for 2 days, and not 3 people for 4 days. This was the route they chose after an analysis of risk showed that it had a slightly higher chance of survival. The capsule had very little power, and thus it was like sitting in an industrial meat locker for 4 days. A CO2 buildup due to breathing in the capsule posed a huge problem. The astronauts used PVC pipe, duct tape, and lithium hydroxide to diffuse the CO2 and create a system that would allow breathing. The astronauts needed to power down the command module in order to save as much power as possible, because it would be needed in order to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. Mission Control gave the astronauts a 50-step process to power up the command module. Remember that this wasn't as easy as sending a picture. They needed to write the steps in a zero-gravity environment, on torn-up pieces of paper and cardboard. A single misstep would cost them their lives. The power-up was successful. However, the change in atmospheric pressure resulted in the loss of communication for around 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Finally, Mission Control received a sign that the astronauts had returned to Earth safely. The room erupted in joy and emotion. Tears and hugs were being shared all around the room.